Breaking tonight, a sudden reversal by Canada after Donald Trump threatened to stop trade talks. Ottawa changes course with just hours to spare after Trump had this to say about Canada.
Canada should be the 51st state, okay? It really should.
And passengers at Vancouver's airport caught in hundreds of flight delays.
It is frustrating for passengers, it's frustrating for us, it's frustrating for everyone involved.
A turbulent start to the summer travel season. Canada's largest pride parade marches through Toronto and sends a message about this moment.
The sense of community and the celebration is still here, even with the things that are happening around the world.
From CBC News, this is The National with Ian Hennemensing.
There is a major development tonight in Canada-U.S. trade talks. Late this evening, the federal government suddenly announcing it is now rescinding its tax targeting big tech companies. The Prime Minister is saying talks can now resume. This comes just 2 days after Trump abruptly posted online that trade talks were off unless Canada dropped the digital services tax. It was just hours away from taking effect tonight when Ottawa made the announcement. Sam Sampson is in Washington. And Sam, take us through this late news from the federal government.
So this statement, it says the finance minister announced he is rescinding the tax in anticipation of a mutually beneficial comprehensive trade agreement with the United States. The statement goes on to say, Ian, that both Prime Minister Mark Carney and U.S. President Donald Trump have agreed that parties will resume negotiations with a view towards agreeing on a deal by July 21st this year. So it's plausible to suggest there were ongoing conversations about this through the weekend, right up to the last hour, because the tax was supposed to come into effect tomorrow. But now Canada will not collect this levy, and the finance minister will bring forward legislation to rescind the digital services tax. Carney also said earlier this month, remember, that he and Trump would work to make a trade agreement happen within 30 days. Well, in this statement, the Prime Minister says this announcement supports a resumption of negotiations. And this tax has been in talks for years, going back to the Trudeau government. Sunday's statement uses the phrase Canada's new government a few times, something the Prime Minister has been doing a lot lately, and perhaps signaling that the decisions of the past Liberal government are ones Mark Carney is willing to revisit to make a trade deal with Trump.
And just how intense was the pressure, Sam, to lift this tax?
I mean, it seemed very heavy. I mean, Trump straight up said he wouldn't talk anymore about trade with Canada because of this tax. He said it on Friday in a Truth Social post, and he reiterated it again on Fox News Sunday.
You said you're stopping all trade discussions with Canada?
Until such time as they drop certain taxes, yeah. Canada is a very tough country to deal with, I will say that.
But
and I love Canada.
You have USMCA in place.
I know, but
You'll have to do it.
But USMCA is no good if they cheat.
This tax was aimed at global tech giants that made at least $20 million off of selling digital services to Canadians. So think Meta, Google, Amazon. It was a 3% levy, and it was retroactive back to 2022. So the first payment would have seen roughly 2.7 billion Canadian dollars from American companies alone. But now it looks like that won't happen, and trade talks may resume with the President of the United States.
Sam Sampson reporting tonight from Washington. And another story breaking tonight, this one out of Idaho. Authorities say at least 2 firefighters are dead after a sniper ambushed them. The firefighters were responding to a call in a mountain area when the shooting began. However, this evening, another major development, the body of a man with a firearm has been found nearby. That shelter-in-place order has been lifted. And so Thomas Dagla has been tracking this for us tonight. And Thomas, what's the latest?
The development tonight coming from Idaho authorities confirming that the SWAT team there on Canfield Mountain, the site of that attack, they have found the body of what they describe as a deceased male found with a firearm next to the body. So by all accounts, it looks like this was the gunman who had attacked those firefighters who drew them in to that popular destination for hiking in northwestern Idaho near the border with Washington State in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. This developing throughout the day today. Initially, it was a brush fire that was called into authorities. Firefighters responded. They suffered from sniper fire. Once sheriff's deputies responded as well, they also fought the gunfire from this sniper. As we say, at least 2 firefighters were killed, a third taken to hospital. An unknown number of civilians also caught on that mountain who were out on their Sunday hiking or biking at that destination. So it's unclear ultimately how many people were hit with gunfire, but authorities in Idaho telling locals that the shelter-in-place order has now been lifted, but the fire that was at the start of all this, the brush fire, is still burning. It's unclear how much ground that is now covering, as authorities were focusing on the manhunt for several hours on that mountain in Idaho. But as I say, the suspect, by all accounts, appears to have been killed, perhaps a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Authorities are not saying at this point how he died, but the body again was found with a firearm next to him. Police have said that officers faced gunfire from what appeared to be a high-powered rifle today, Ian.
Yeah, and with the shelter-in-place order being lifted, pretty clear they feel that this was the responsibility of one person, and that is the person who they found dead. Thomas Dagala reporting from Toronto tonight. Thank you. Donald Trump appears to be applying pressure on Israel tonight to strike a deal with Hamas and end their 20-month war. As Margaret Evans shows us, this comes as Israeli forces unleash more deadly strikes on Gaza, forcing families to flee yet again.
Just one glimpse of life in the shooting gallery that Gaza has become. An Israeli airstrike in Jabalia, northern Gaza. The number of Palestinians being killed by Israeli fire every day is relentless. At least 81 over a 24-hour period on Saturday alone. That's according to Gaza health officials. 3 of Iman Abu Marouf's children are part of Sunday's tally, after the tent they were sleeping in was hit by an airstrike overnight. They bombed us while we were sleeping on the ground, she says. We didn't do anything wrong. The Israel Defense Forces issued new evacuation orders for parts of Gaza City and the north, telling people to move south to Al-Mawasi for their own safety. That's close to where Abu Marouf's children were killed, an Israeli-designated humanitarian zone that has repeatedly come under Israeli fire. On Saturday, in Tel Aviv, tens of thousands of Israelis gathered to demand their government agree to a ceasefire with Hamas in exchange for Israeli hostages still held by the militant group. Many in the crowd hope Israel's perceived recent success against Iran will offer Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu the political cover he needs with hardliners in his own party to approve a deal.
We have to turn the military successful achievements to political gains for all the region, first and foremost for Israel.
But Netanyahu has repeatedly refused Hamas's main demand, a permanent end to the conflict.
I think that a large percentage of why we're still at war is for political reasons, for our government wanting some kind of total victory dream that can't really be achieved.
The U.S. President Donald Trump has brought his own brand of pressure to bear with a social media post saying, "Make the deal" in Gaza. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Jerusalem.
The head of the U.S. nuclear watchdog says the recent U.S. strikes on Iran fell short of crippling its nuclear program.
It is clear that there has been severe damage, but it's not total damage.
Rafael Grossi warns Iran could restart uranium enrichment in just months. That contradicts Trump's claims that the strikes set Iran back by decades. Early Pentagon assessments agree with the UN, suggesting the core of Iran's program remains intact. Well, this is some of the damage in Ukraine tonight after Russia unleashed a massive aerial assault. Ukrainian officials say it was the largest of the 3-year war. More than 500 drones and missiles were launched at cities across the country, destroying buildings and injuring several people. This is the latest in an escalating wave of attacks, crushing hopes for a peace deal anytime soon. Investigators in Philadelphia are trying to pinpoint the cause of an early morning explosion that destroyed several row houses. One person was killed, at least 2 others injured. The blast caused 3 homes to collapse and significantly damaged others. A frustrating start to the summer travel season in Vancouver, where hundreds of flights were delayed over the weekend. And the cause is not new. As Yasmin Khanea explains, ongoing staffing shortages at Canada's Air Traffic Control Agency continue to have a big impact.
A way to pass the time, with more than 200 flights delayed at Vancouver International Airport this weekend.
My first flight, like Calgary to Vancouver, was delayed, like 2 hours.
On Saturday, flights were delayed by 2 hours on average. The travel disruptions being blamed on an ongoing shortage of air traffic controllers at NAV Canada, the private nonprofit that manages air navigation across the country.
We don't want to see delays like this. It is frustrating for passengers, it's frustrating for us, it's frustrating for everyone involved.
The staffing crunch has been going on for months.
It's very annoying. It's cost the company a lot of money.
It reached new heights in May when an Air Canada pilot vented his frustrations to passengers stuck on the tarmac.
Since we got the time, if you want to write a letter to your MP and tell them what's going on.
On Friday, WestJet issued a statement saying more than 300,000 of its passengers have been impacted by the NAV Canada shortages since April. NAV Canada says it's working hard to train new air traffic controllers, but that takes time.
It's a highly skilled position, 24 to 36 months of training that's delivered by NAV Canada to become a licensed controller.
The association representing air traffic controllers says the profession has been historically understaffed, an issue made worse by the pandemic when there was less training.
All those factors combined to put us in a situation now where we're not able to train fast enough to make up for the shortfall and to replace the number of people that we're losing.
Vancouver's airport says Monday will be the busiest travel day of the Canada Day long weekend, with almost 88,000 passengers expected to transit through the airport. Yasmin Khanea, CBC News, Vancouver.
This is a historic weekend for one of Canada's best-known intersections, Portage and Main in downtown Winnipeg. As Josh Crabb shows us, for the first time in 46 years, pedestrians are able to cross at street level.
Let's go!
It was a crossing for the history books. On a bright and sunny Manitoba day, this Winnipeg intersection, known for being cold and windy, was bustling, thanks to the first official pedestrian crossing in more than 4 decades.
We're putting an end to 46 years of debating whether or not people should be allowed to cross the street.
The intersection, first established in the 1860s, is one of the most recognizable corners in the country, an unofficial gathering spot featured in Canadian folklore and song. Around 100 years after it opened, the growing suburbs started drawing visitors away from Portage and Main. In an effort to bring people back, an underground heated walkway was built, a way to escape the frigid winters.
Corner of Portage and Main, coldest spot in Winnipeg.
Barricades were erected, closing off the street-level crossing. It had been that way for the past 4 decades, but then upgrades needed for the underground concourse meant officials were faced with costly repairs. They decided it was easier and cheaper just to reopen the intersection.
Because it's kind of like a historic moment, yeah.
Not everyone supports the reopening. There are concerns about pedestrian safety at this busy intersection, and some drivers worry it will slow down traffic too much.
I think it's not a good idea.
Advocates say it will make it easier for people who use mobility devices.
I used to have to go underneath in the tunnels, and even the ramps underneath were very steep, very inclined. So it's great that I can just leave my apartment, go across the street.
A corner with a storied past, now entering the next phase of its colorful and controversial existence. Josh Crabb, CBC News, Winnipeg.
One of the biggest tournaments of the gamer world has come to Canada for the first time.
These are our athletes, right, within our games.
Excitement and adrenaline inside the Call of Duty Championship. Next. Plus, the Canadian producer behind some legendary rock albums. Why Bob Ezrin came back to Canada after decades in the U.S.
The divisiveness, the kind of level of anger, and a kind of undercurrent of impending violence.
And later, a majestic creature pops in for a visit.
So we have this moose head in our passenger seat.
The close encounter on an Alberta road. We're back in 2.
Stop.
Beyoncé was forced to stop her hometown show in Houston this weekend. The singer, riding in this Cadillac, suspended above the crowd when it started to tilt in midair. There were some tense moments, but the car was lowered and Beyoncé got out safely. No one was hurt, and the show went on. Tonight is the culmination of Pride festivities in Toronto. Thousands took to the streets today for Canada's largest Pride parade. Thomas Dangler shows us the celebrations, but also the concerns for the future.
Loud and proud, Canada's biggest Pride parade taking over Toronto, with the maple leaf this year displayed prominently amid that sea of rainbows.
We are really lucky, but it's because of the people who came before us.
The flag even worn by Cindy Keogh from Indiana.
I'm actually looking to possibly move to Toronto because the current administration is not okay. Very vile, unacceptable.
Indeed, the Trump administration looming large over this year's Pride, with revelers calling out the White House's attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives.
As so much of the world is going backwards in terms of where we are, to be here and be present and be unapologetically ourselves is the most we can do.
We've been coming to Pride for many years now.
Yeah.
And the sense of community and the celebration is still here, even with the things that are happening around the world.
Pride Toronto recently said it was facing a $900,000 budget shortfall, largely blaming U.S.-based corporate sponsors pulling out. Google and Home Depot both confirmed they've withdrawn their sponsorships, with other giants like Nissan, Adidas, Clorox, and Tim Hortons lowering or declining to renew their funding.
Many of the prides in the U.S. and other parts of the world have also been hit with some of the exact same sponsors.
Pride Toronto says much of the shortfall has been made up by government funding, as the mayor promises more money over 3 years.
The City of Toronto is all in for love and justice, the freedom to love who you want.
Still, organizers fear they'll have to shrink next year's event, a once unthinkable prospect after decades spent growing in size. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Toronto.
For the first time ever, one of the world's most popular video game tournaments is in Canada. Jamie Strachan digs into the hype surrounding the Call of Duty League Championship.
It's fitting this event is taking place in a hockey arena. It may be called esports, but it has the energy of an NHL playoff game.
At any point in time, the crowd, just like a hockey game, could get hyped up.
Fans have converged on Kitchener, Ontario, just west of Toronto. It's the first time the Call of Duty League Championship has been held in Canada.
These are our athletes, right, within our game. So we value them as much as like a professional sports team.
Always keeping them second guessing. A first-person shooter game, Call of Duty is a seminal video game franchise. 30 to go. With multiple editions spanning 2 decades and around $30 billion in sales. Optic Texas with a round 1 upset.
This is an incredible experience to get to see people take the play of a game to its absolute pinnacle.
Big pinch now from Quinn, dealt with through side door.
The talent on this team, anything is possible.
This event, the culmination of a long season, has brought together the best 8 teams in the world with a $2 million purse on the line.
People laughed at them. You're playing games. You're never going to make any money playing games. Now they're the ones laughing at them.
Are they going to jump on this one? The game itself, frenetic.
They are locked in now.
It's like chess on wheels, right? So it's just constantly going.
Some people may look at an event like this and say, oh, it's just a bunch of guys playing video games. But ask fans, the guys up on that stage are athletes all the way.
They're way better. Like, I mean, I'm good, but I'm just at home in my basement gaming.
Okay. Well, forgot bomb, and Abizi forgot his legs.
But for the millions in their basement, a chance to dream.
You don't have to be 6'5" to play. You don't have to be a fast skater. Anybody at home can pick up a controller and play.
They beat the hell out of you, really.
And maybe one day play under the bright lights for a big payday.
A social media trend is helping drive a global shortage of a traditional Japanese tea.
It's really to a point where it's almost unsustainable.
The TikTok craze fueling the demand. Plus, the producer behind some of rock's biggest legends.
Hello, is there anybody in there?
Why he gave up his U.S. citizenship and came home to Canada.
I was beginning to not recognize the America that I chose.
My interview with Bob Ezrin. Plus, they're towering, destructive, and seem to come out of nowhere.
The likelihood of rogue waves is kind of like avalanches in the sense that you don't know exactly when one will happen.
Why they're happening more often in Canada. The National breaks down the stories shaping our world. Next. A judge has approved a class action lawsuit against Tim Hortons over emails sent during its 2024 Roll Up to Win contest. As many as 500,000 Canadians wrongly received notification that they'd won a $64,000 boat. At the time, the coffee giant apologized for the mistake. The judge says the class action can move forward, but only for Quebec residents. Demands for matcha green tea is skyrocketing, and now some Japanese suppliers are struggling to keep up. Jenna Benchetrit shows us how social media is helping fuel the craze.
At this cafe, matcha, the powder tea with a vivid green hue and earthy flavor,
and you said unsweetened?
Has overthrown espresso as customers' caffeine fix of choice.
Here you go, 200 matchas a day. It's quite a bit of whiskey, I would say.
The tea has become so popular, a global shortage is upending its delicate supply chain.
Look how lightweight it is right now.
Some suppliers are even cutting customers off.
One of our suppliers, they say your maximum is like 10 kilos a month. And like beyond that point, like we need to find elsewhere.
High-grade matcha is traditionally used in Japanese tea ceremonies.
Matcha.
But a social media frenzy has turned matcha-flavored products into a menu staple, both at small shops and big chains like Starbucks.
The negative effect is for the tea ceremony practitioners that drink the high-grade matcha for their practice.
Matcha is made in small seasonal batches by grounding tencha leaves. But Japan's tea farmers are aging out just as international demand soars.
It's really to a point where it's almost unsustainable for the industry.
This Japanese tea company sends a third of its supply to international buyers, who are in for a price shock next year.
There will be supply coming in, but the pricing might have some people have second thoughts for the business.
One social media creator is also having second thoughts. She went viral for her matcha videos, but she scaled back.
I personally toned down in posting powders, but sometimes there are brands that you like, and then if it becomes too popular, it just gets sold out.
2.5 days for us to go through the whole bag.
In an effort to protect their own stash, the cafe added a third tea supplier, hoping that will be enough to ride out the matcha craze. Jenna Benchetrit, CBC News, Toronto.
Now let's break down the stories shaping our world. A rising tide of rogue waves hitting Canada's coastlines, the unpredictable walls of water that carry real danger.
The likelihood of rogue waves is kind of like avalanches.
We'll break down the new tools to monitor and better prepare for them. But first. The iconic sound of a musical masterpiece. The man behind that legendary hit and some of rock's biggest songs is Canadian Bob Ezrin. But after decades in the U.S., he renounced his citizenship and came back home.
I was beginning to not recognize the America that I chose.
I sat down with him in Toronto to talk about the creative magic behind more than half a century of making music, including Pink Floyd's The Wall, and why it was time to come home.
Now, it's been, what, a couple of months since you announced that you were
leaving the United States, renouncing your U.S. citizenship. So you've had a little time to reflect on that. How does that feel now?
Well, since I got my tax bill yesterday, no, it's all good. It feels natural to me. This is where I was born. It's where I grew up. It's where I got my start in music and entertainment, and where all my family's from. My kids were all born here, so it's coming home, really.
Now, you didn't just move back from the United States. You did, as I mentioned, renounce your citizenship. You symbolically, kind of metaphorically tore up your passport. So why did you do that? Why did you take that step?
There's a couple of reasons. I think the most fundamental reason is I'm a kind of one partner person. You know, I'm very monogamous in many, many ways. Then the secondary thing is that I was beginning to not recognize the America that I chose, and starting to get disturbed about trends that were happening, social trends in the States, the divisiveness, the kind of level of anger, and a kind of undercurrent of impending violence, and after a while you just started to feel really uncomfortable.
And this is a country that celebrates your achievements. As we do this interview, you're about to receive the Governor General's Award for Performing Arts in Popular Music.
Yeah, it's amazing.
What does that mean to you?
Oh, sometimes I have to sort of pinch myself and say, are they talking to, you mean me? You're talking to me? Because I just do what I do, but I really appreciate the recognition, and I appreciate being appreciated. Everyone does. We all want love and respect in life. So, when things like this happen, it just fills me up with a warm feeling of belonging. Yeah, it underscores that,
To Canada.
Yeah, belonging to Canada, belonging to this culture, this country.
I mean, you shouldn't be surprised by honors like this. Just look at your musical resume. It reads like a Hall of Fame entry. And so let's talk a little bit about the music and Pink Floyd's The Wall. You were the producer on that. So we dug up a review from the Toronto Star from the time, 1979, I guess, and it wasn't very complimentary. The reviewer did not like the album, didn't think it was relevant. Yes. History has proven that reviewer wrong.
Yeah.
It is on many lists as one of the greatest albums of all time. Why do you think it's endured?
I think that it is a story of disaffection. It's a story, and in a way, it's almost a story of teenage angst and separation. And because we all know that those of us in the music business are eternal children, puer aeternis. That's it. And we're all Peter Pans. And so Roger's story, which is really what that is, it's really Roger's story, but we invented a Gestalt character. This is Pink, and Pink had a bit of Roger's history, but also a lot of the characteristics of most of the rock stars that we knew. And they're looking for approval, and they're looking for validation, because maybe as kids they didn't get that. So in expressing something that has to do with that, when the motivation is that you feel not validated, you feel not seen. So that's a condition that most teenagers go through naturally.
Beyond that, though, there's the music. There's just so last night I had the headphones on and I was listening to Comfortably Numb, and I wasn't thinking about all the bigger issues that you just raised about the album. It just sounds fantastic. Like.
Yeah, well, yes, it does, and there's no point in false modesty about it. We worked very hard to get it to sound that great.
Hello, is there anybody in there? Just not if you can hear
So Bob,
me.
tell me about the piano.
Okay, so this is an 1898 Steinway A. So it's a little bit bigger than a parlor grand and a little bit shorter than a full-size grand. It's about 6 feet long, and it has a uniquely rich sound to it. It sounds like a big piano. But I've had this piano. I bought it from Paul Hahn Pianos here in Toronto. It was rejected by Glenn Gould as a practice piano. And Paul called me and said, I got this great piano. Glenn Gould almost bought it, but you should probably get this. Comfortably numb. Yeah. So pretty much everything that I have written or arranged somewhere ends up on this piano, whether it's in the genesis of it or whether it's in the development of it.
Is there any studio moment that you think about all these years later that you're particularly proud of or maybe not proud of?
There aren't many moments, I can say, honestly, there aren't many moments that I'm not proud of or that I'm not at peace with. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it. Yeah.
Because, I have to give myself a break. At the time, when I was 23 years old, did I make mistakes? Hell yeah. And, was I a rock and roll lunatic for some years? Yes, I was. And so I look back at that. I choose not to regret it or to feel guilty about it because that kid at that time in that job surrounded by those people couldn't have done anything else. I mean, obviously, because that's what I did.
So this piano has a connection to the Kiss song Beth.
Yes. It came in as a kind of a jaunty number. And I took it home and I just started...
Beth, I hear you calling, but I can't come home right now. Me and the boys.
As you speak, I've been thinking about how much music has changed over the years, and now we live in an era of streaming, of people being able to record albums on their own in their basements, of AI. What do you think of where music is today?
Well, the good news is that through the democratization of the tools, anybody can make music. And the bad news is that anybody can make music.
Yeah.
So there's an awful lot of not great music that's being created that goes out into the ether. And now it's really tough to sort of pick out what's special. So much depends on word of mouth, and social media has been very good at providing some of that. But I think there's more confusion now than there ever was before. And there is more repetition because it is human nature to emulate, to have heroes and want to dress like they dress and do what they do and sound like they sound. And in the earlier days, it was very tough to get a record released. Really tough.
Mm-hmm.
So you not only had to go past that stage of emulation into the stage of realization and actualization, to becoming yourself, but it had to get so good that somebody at the top of this massive pyramid, somebody way up there would put the money down for you to record it in a studio because it was so expensive to do, and then put it out. Now, because you can make a pretty good facsimile of good music like that. And there's no barrier to entry. You can put it up on Spotify. So a lot of people don't actually go through those processes. They don't think they have to.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not seeing as much in the development of musical talent as we used to see. Things are coming much faster. They are much less, this is my opinion, this is old guy talking, but in my opinion, much less realized than they would have been if that person had just been allowed to grow for a little bit longer and encouraged, sometimes cajoled into do better.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be of a higher quality.
We told Ezrin that we wanted to spend 20 minutes sitting down with him. We ended up interviewing him for about an hour, and a long version of it, I think about a 45-minute version of that, is on YouTube. It's fascinating. The toughest thing was cutting that down to 10 minutes for the National, so I do recommend watching the longer version. Now, one of Ezrin's friends is Mike Myers, the comedian, who's also spent much of his career in the United States, and in the wake of Donald Trump's 51st state threats, his simple but powerful gesture turned into a symbol of defiance. Paul Hunter spoke with Myers recently about how that Saturday Night Live moment spawned a movement here in Canada.
So we're here at the CBC building in Toronto, Mike. I used to work here. You've spent some time
yes,
here, right?
Yes, yeah.
But on that night, a few months ago, I live and work in Washington, D.C. now, and I was at home. It was the week of Zelensky and Trump in the Oval, right?
Yeah.
I was watching Saturday Night Live. Right, and you come on cold open, right? And you're Elon, right, with a chainsaw. And the show goes on, and then it ends.
My thanks to Tate McRae, Mike Myers.
And you come out, I think you had a puffy on or something?
Yes, I did, yeah.
And you open it up.
Yeah.
And there it is.
Yes.
Canada not for sale. And then this thing, right? And I remember thinking, holy cow, right? Because it was a tense week, and you did this on that platform with that audience to give that message, right? That was the first thing I thought.
Right.
Blew me away. The second thing I thought was, I really want to talk to Mike Myers about what went into that, because it exploded. And let's go in here.
Oh, okay.
You ignited a movement. There's no denying it.
I don't know. I was just being honest. I was just saying what was on my mind, you know.
But that's exactly it. And how Canadian is that?
Tomorrow night on The National, Mike Myers opens up about that moment and why he feels such pride in being Canadian.
It was just leave us alone. That's all it was. Just, we love you guys. What are you doing? This is madness. We love Americans. But we can love Americans and not want to be Americans. You know what I mean? And there is a difference, you know?
The National, in conversation with Mike Myers, tomorrow night.
That spirit of resilience will likely take on a special meaning this Canada Day, and we'll have full coverage beginning at 6 a.m. Eastern in Charlottetown with Heather Hiscox before Adrian takes over from LeBreton Flats Park in Ottawa from 10 until 2 p.m. Eastern. Coming up, giant and unpredictable, rogue waves are happening more frequently.
There was a 17.5-meter wave that came by, and that's, for context, about 6 stories.
The scientists tracking their destructive power. Next. Once considered a myth, rogue waves are now more frequent and intense, an ocean phenomenon that's creating peril for ships and coastal areas, including along Canada's shoreline.
You don't know exactly when one will happen, but there are factors that lead into the probability of them.
Johanna Wagstaff tells us how these chaotic swells are formed and the tools used to detect them.
Rogue waves, giant, unexpected walls of water that come out of nowhere. They used to be the stuff of ocean lore, but turns out these giants are happening way more often than we thought. Spotted in the North Atlantic, off the coast of Africa. But what about here in Canada? We're out on the water, checking out this data collecting buoy. Just off the coast of Esquimalt, BC. It's just one of over 40 in Marine Lab's North America-wide growing network, watching our coasts and recording rogue waves in real time. Here's why that's a big deal. We thought these rogue waves were once-in-a-thousand-year events, but these buoys have recorded almost 400 rogue waves in the past 6 years, all of them over 3 meters tall. One of them, back in 2020, was higher than a 6-story building.
So this rogue wave was measured off of Ucluelet near Tofino. There was a 17.5-meter wave that came by, and that's, for context, about 6 stories. But the unusual thing about it was that it was in The background waves that were 6 meters was the highest ratio ever recorded, and so we needed to go and double and triple check that.
I've always been fascinated by these so-called freak waves. Technically, they fall into the category of natural disasters like hurricanes, tsunamis, or tornadoes. But because rogue waves are so rare, we have so little data on how they work. They weren't even recognized by scientists until just a few decades ago. But here's what we've got. These waves are at least twice as tall as the surrounding waves. They're unpredictable, and they can come from unexpected directions, often against prevailing winds and swells. You need a whole cocktail of factors to come together: wind, swell, currents. It's a chaotic, non-linear wave interaction where one wave will suddenly gather energy from others and explode in size. You can only imagine what that means for any vessels out on the water.
When you get multiple storm events that happen and bring waves from different directions that all kind of superpose together, in those cases, sometimes that's called confused seas. There is more opportunity for rogue waves because what happens is these different waves from different directions tend to superpose and add together, creating more likely to have rogue waves.
While we still can't predict rogue waves, AI tools and live sensor data can trigger early warnings one day, flag extreme events, and improve forecasts over time.
I think that there is a lot of interesting science that's happening by collecting more data along coastlines. There's ways to cross-section all of that analysis and understand how many rogue waves exist and what are the factors that drive them. So I think the likelihood of rogue waves, it's kind of like avalanches in the sense that you don't know exactly when one will happen, but there are factors that lead into the probability of them, and that is definitely predictable.
This is data that helps marine pilots, ferry operators, and ports adjust their routes, dock safely, and avoid costly disruptions, or worse. In 2015, a rogue wave off the coast of Tofino capsized and sunk the whale-watching boat Leviathan II, leaving 6 people dead and underscoring just how dangerous these giant rogue waves can be. Rogue waves used to be a myth. Today, we're spotting them more often, and tomorrow, maybe, we'll be ready for them.
As Johanna mentioned, rogue waves are now more common, and since 2019, the 5 biggest detected along North America's coastline were either off Nova Scotia or British Columbia, and all were more than 9 meters high. Next, a road-tripping couple gets a taste of the wild in Jasper.
I just completely stopped the vehicle, like in shock. Could not believe it.
How a moose came too close for comfort in our moment. Well, not something you see every day, right? A couple went on a road trip through Jasper and got this surprise: a moose walking up to their car and poking its head in. No one was hurt. Everyone was able to carry on with their day. And so tonight, their jaw-dropping run-in with Canadian wildlife makes our moment.
What do you think, babe?
I can't even think. The Canadian safari. I just completely stopped the vehicle, like in shock. Could not believe it. I travel for wildlife like everywhere I go. This year I was road tripping the Rockies. I actually brought my husband, who is South African, and I wanted to show him a proper Canadian safari. And we're just driving down for a few minutes. I just see this shape moving towards me out of the fog. It's a moose, like a proper male moose with its majestic antlers. By this point, we were just so in shock, sitting in our vehicle as it's approaching. He licked the door where I still have the moose saliva. So we had this moose head in our passenger seat where my husband Matt was sitting. I don't want to push our luck here, like we found ourselves in this situation, but let me like gently release the brake so we can kind of roll away slowly, and eventually just peacefully wandered out into the forest on with its life. So it was very magical.
So has that whet your appetite for more stories about unusual encounters with Canadian wildlife? He asked. Well, coincidentally, on Cross Country Checkup today, the second hour was devoted to that. And among other stories, there was a guy who was on a coastline near Prince George, not coastline, like a lakeshore, and also had an encounter with a moose. So CBC Listen app, Cross Country Checkup, maybe you can listen to it on a road trip. Thanks for being with us. I'm Ian Hannah-Mansing in Vancouver. Good night.